Hello there, everybody, and welcome back to Circling Seattle Sports on Converge Media. I am your host, Charles, joined by Bel. As always, we are now, 3 to 4 weeks into the month of February. We
Yeah.
had a little bit of a lighter week. That changes this week. We're back to the important stuff, and we're just going to get into it with some coaching news. That's kind of what we've only had with the Seahawks the last few months, but coaching staff news and some interesting things with our wide receiver.
And
So
interesting things around the league.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's for sure. So Belle, why don't you lead us into the Seahawks here?
let's do it. So, interesting things about our wide receiver, DK Metcalf. He was playing through an injury for most of the season. He has recently had surgery and is in a boot. He'd said that it bothered him all season and it should only be a minor setback for him. Would you like to take it away with our official coaching staff?
So we have the 2022 coaching staff. The list was finally announced. I know we've had sort of some things with Clint Hurt being announced as the defensive coordinator, some hirings here and there, and someone who was here for like a week in Ed Donatel, who
Yeah.
his Seahawks
It's
tenure
bad.
very short. But we do have the 2022 coaching staff, so we'll take a look here on the offensive side of things. Pete Carroll is obviously your head coach, but he also serves the role of executive vice president. You can take a look at the list on your screen here. I won't read them all just because it's a decently long size list, and you can have it on your screen here. But the notable ones being Shane Waldron staying as your offensive coordinator, Nate Carroll still a senior offensive assistant. Yes, Nate Carroll is related to Pete Carroll, in case you were curious about that. Andy Dickerson taking the offensive line spot, as we thought. Kerry Joseph as the assistant quarterbacks coach, Sanjay Lal taking over as the offensive passing game coordinator and the wide receivers coach. So that's the offensive side of the ball there. As we shift over to defense, as we mentioned, Clint Hurt, the defensive coordinator spot, Larry H to the Izzo, as Bell has been saying all before the show started. The special teams coordinator still, Aaron Curry, former Seahawk linebacker. The assistant defensive line and defensive end coach taking that role recently. Sean Desai, who we've been talking about for weeks now, the assistant head coach of the defense, which is still kind of a bizarre title. But two other names that I want to look at here so we've got three former coaches on the defensive side three former players, pardon me, on the defensive side of the ball. And and Aaron Curry, Deshaun Shedd taking over the assistant defensive backs coaching role a year ago, I believe. And Will Tukuafu, former fullback and defensive tackle, taking over in the quality control spot, which is kind of interesting to look at there. It's not the biggest deal in the world, considering that it's not like Will Tukuafu was. I'm not anything to put down on Will Tukuafu, but just sort of interesting to look at, some of these former Seahawks coming back to take over coaching roles. I know somebody that I would like to see in a coaching role is Cam Chancellor.
Yeah.
Will that happen? It doesn't. I remember asking Cam. I was like, there was an autograph signing. I said, "Do you want to go into coaching?" He says, "No, not not at the moment." But obviously, we've seen things change with the snap of a finger.
Yeah.
So, but it was certainly nice to see, that we can get a list and see who's going to be a part of it. Because as we've been talking about ever since the season ended, it's another big off season, right? And these are this coaching staff really is going to be in charge of a lot. And adjustments is something I always talk about. And that was brought up on the 17th in a press conference from our new defensive coordinator, Clint Hurt. So do you want to take a look at some of the key points from that press conference?
Yeah. So again, Clint Hurt press conference on the 17th. He has insisted that the defense would be more aggressive this coming season and that we won't see defensive linemen dropping into coverage. So very positive note there.
It should have happened in the first place.
Yeah. We can only improve, and that's what he's going to do. So
I love Puna Ford, but in coverage, no, please, no.
And then he also had some notes on Pete Carroll's involvement. So he made it clear that Carroll's willing and able to adapt and adjust. And that was one of the first things the two discussed when Hurt joined the coaching staff in 2017. He's given full autonomy. So that's a big deal when you're in a position, right? You want to be able to call the shots.
And I know that that's kind of been a thing that, has been floated around in the fan base is that, it's Pete Carroll's defense, right? And he's as a former defensive coach, someone who has influence at the secondary. It was like, oh, is Hurt just like a yes man? And it just seemed like from the comments that were made that it's like, no, this is my job.
Right.
This is my defense. I mean, it'll be great to take things from him because of the experience he has. But that's kind of what Hurt said. Hey, there's no merit to that.
Yeah. And he realizes that he's going to have someone to answer to, that being Pete Carroll, but he's up for the challenge. So that's good. And he also spoke about Desai's hiring. He said, I love the fact that he had his year of being a play caller this past season in Chicago. There's no doubt in my mind he's going to get that opportunity again in the NFL, and deservedly so. But he's somebody I consider a blessing that I can lean on. He's been through it already for a year, what I'm getting ready to go through now. So sort of a mentorship there. And luckily he has, again, like he said, someone to lean on in Pete Carroll and Desai.
Yeah, that's something good to have. I mean, that's what I think we talked about when we were looking at candidates, right? It was like somebody that I like having experience in that field. It would be nice, but obviously there are people that don't take that route. It's like, oh, I was already a DC and like with Desai in Denver, right? Oh, I'm gonna come in, if that respect is there within the coaching staff already in the organization, sure, let's take that bet. But it doesn't help at all to have, those other names that can say, hey, in like a 4-3, and I know they're talking about going to a 3-4. How can we like integrate that? I know Denver does that a lot. Mm-hmm. Denver's typically historically a 3-4 team. Von Miller before that trade was made, it's like, hey, how can we really take our personnel that we're going to have this upcoming, like Bobby Wagner? How is Bobby Wagner going to fit in a 3-4 defense? Yeah. So I'm sure, having that experience, that's what I was talking about with looking at adding, more potential to that defensive staff, more experience. Brock Huard to use too many cooks in the kitchen, which I think is stupid in that regard, because why would you not want to have all those defensive minds in there?
Right.
When you're trying to get this defense that, in the points aspect was good, but in terms of like everything else, yardage and all that was bad, right? Mm-hmm. You've got a lot of talent in the defense, and you can have all this experience from different places where they've had different, player types, different talent, and be able to utilize that, through those different lines. So I think that's only a good thing.
You would assume that some people would be bitter on taking that back seat, but hopefully they work together well.
Yeah, I would hope so.
Yeah.
Right.
He also mentioned that he eventually wants to be a head coach. So
it's an interesting thing.
Do we see Pete Carroll leaving anytime soon?
No. I don't, unless Hurt comes out and has a great first few years. I don't know if he's your successor in that department. I know that Carroll, I think he signed through 25. Mm-hmm. That, whether he plays out that contract or not, I think the organization's like the loyalty there is like, hey, you've done a lot here. You've obviously made a great culture. You've had a great impact on the league. We'll let you play out that contract. I don't see him coaching past 2025, but it could come sooner than that.
Yeah.
Would Hurt be that guy? I don't know. I don't know at this point, but it's obviously going to be his first year as a defensive coordinator, had some time in the organization itself. Let it play out. Let's see. Let's have this conversation week 17 of week 18. Sorry, of this upcoming year. Yeah. But at the moment, unsure. I'm going to say no at the moment, at least for him being his successor.
Good news is also that he mentioned that he thinks the world of Quandre Diggs and DJ Reed, and he wants to have those guys back on his defense. So that's, again, good news. We saw good progress from those guys throughout the season, and it'd be great to continue to have them on the defense. On February 18th, the Seahawks reported that they're planning on adding 2 new video boards to the north side of Lumen Field, flanking the east and west side of the current video board above the Hawks' nest. The hope is to have them installed by next season. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting just because at least if you look at the Hawks' nest side of the stadium, there's a lot of like there's those places where, I mean, the Hawks' nest goes like that, and then there's this open space. It'll be fine.
Yeah.
I don't think it's that big of a deal. I'm interested to see how those boards are held up, because unless you like add I'm sure there's some. I'm not an engineering major, so I can't give you an idea of what that would look like. I don't know. I don't think it might be better for the fan experience,
Right.
because I know that board that's above the Hawks nest is like really up and
Up there.
down.
Yeah.
So to have it wider I think would be fine. But overall, I'm not too big on the reporting on the fan experience side of
Yeah.
things, unless it was like a major thing, like, oh, the team store is gonna offer, a trade in your jersey for a new one, kind of thing.
Oh, coming from a team store employee for Seattle teams.
I don't know what you're talking about.
In more exciting news, DK Metcalf says that he's going to train for the 2024 Olympics. What are we looking at here? Like a short distance run?
Short
What
distance,
do you think?
yeah. Because I know he had some trials that he did where he finished last, but at the same time, you're talking about an NFL athlete who doesn't practice in those short relay kind of things, and you're training against guys who train their whole life for this kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. It'll be kind of interesting. He said it's going to happen. It'll be interesting to think about that. How much that will take away from his, season training. Well, I don't know when that's Summer Olympics, right? I think.
Yeah, I think that's
so. I don't think it'll take away from too much, but I'm just wondering how much, like, when he'll start to prepare for that, right? Because that's 2 years away now.
Well, you would think that it would possibly add to his skill on the field as well if he's practicing his distance running, right?
But it's like two very different things.
Yeah,
running straight.
Whereas
in skin tight clothes compared to wearing pads and worrying about someone
running routes. Yeah.
So it's interesting, and hey, all power to him. If it works out, it works out
for sure.
But I'm not too concerned about it, I guess.
Well, Olympic athlete on a resume doesn't sound bad, so let's hope to see him out there. The league also reported that 112.3 million people watched Super Bowl 56. NBC says that the Rams versus Bengals was the most watched TV show in 5 years, which is surprising to me, honestly.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
It goes back to what we were talking about last week, though, with the MLB, and like, football is king in this country.
Yes.
That shows it. 5 years.
Yeah.
5 years. I mean, tell me, if I were to look up the numbers of the most watched World Series game, it probably wouldn't stack up to that. So that's why it's like, hey, with what we're going to get to in the lockout sort of section, it's not even the Mariners section anymore.
It's just the lockout section.
It just shows, though. I mean, we were talking about numbers last week. There's a number for you.
Yeah.
It just shows you've got a place to grow, and you want to do better on that. But also, speaking about doing better with this combine thing.
Yeah, the players and representatives are concerned about changes to the combine schedule. Players will have to do measurements, bench press, and on-field workouts all in the same day. According to a league source, the change in the schedule was based largely on feedback from prospects in previous years. So, I don't know. As an athlete, do you think that you could do all 3 of them more consistently on one day, or would you want that rest?
Well, I know that when athletes have the pro days at their own colleges, they do it all in the same day. But I don't know. It's kind of been, I mean, this conversation spans over a couple of days. Like, that was the first report on the 16th that came out, and then we have more news on that as the days progress. So it's interesting. I think more of it is the bubble-like atmosphere that will be at the combine.
Yeah.
Because it's reported that the players will not be able to have like personal trainers or masseuses come and see them because I mean, a combine really can make or break your career. Like, if you have a bad combine, hey, like, unless a team takes a chance on you and you're able to make the most of that chance, you could be screwed.
Right.
And there are some players who will have a great combine, and that jettisons them into a draft pick higher than they probably should have gone, right? So the combine has a lot of leeway, a lot of weight on where you're going to be selected, usually, right? Unless, like, you look at some player who, had a really great season, but then he skips the combine. There could be questions about, hey, like an injury. Is his leg still okay? I think Jalen Waddle busted his leg up in that title. He had his leg busted up in that title game that Alabama played. I believe it was the one against Clemson. And the questions were like, hey, is that going to affect his draft stock? He had a pretty solid year,
Yeah.
So it's interesting. You want to do your best if you get that combine invite. But it is interesting to see that the NFL is saying that the changes were based on feedback from actual prospects. And then knowing that they already do that on their pro day, they already put that all in the same. I don't know. It might be like, hey, I'm going to lift on my pro day, but I'm not going to lift for the combine. So I think more of it is that bubble-like atmosphere.
Yeah.
And we do have some other points to look at in the other days,
and the belief is that the new schedule will lead many players to skip their bench press in favor of on-field work. And I kind of understand that. Why wouldn't you want to show how dynamic you are on the field? So I guess you'd
stuff like the 3-cone drill and the 40 time and like the vertical, as opposed to you can lift as strong as you want, but that doesn't always translate. But speaking about guys that lift a lot, I mean, you want to look at the 17th there with somebody that I would hope retires, but I don't think he will.
And based off of his success, I didn't think he would. Aaron Donald, apparently the Rams superstar defensive tackle, reportedly may need to become the NFL's highest paid defensive player to stay with the Rams. He stated that if the Rams brought everybody back, that he would be ready to return, which isn't completely surprising. They had a good season. I think McVay said that they would bring the super team back that they built. So why not keep it that way and see where that success can take them?
It's interesting though to see the terminology that he used. He said if they brought everybody back, he would be ready to return. So
who do you think is everybody in that?
Odell, Von Miller. I think those are the only guys that are really kind of up in the air. But it's interesting though that I didn't think that report when we looked at the Super Bowl, right? I didn't think that had any merit. I'm like, oh, that's just that's just somebody trying to get a headline, or I thought it was just nerves for him, because I know if you watch the mic'd up for that Super Bowl against the Patriots, he's freaking out, dude. He's like breathing really heavy, and he didn't really have much of a contribution in that Super Bowl. So I'm sure it was like, oh, I thought he was just being exaggerative. But it seems like there might be some merit to that. Like, oh, you got to roll out the Brinks truck, right? And then you got to bring everybody back, which kind of seems like countering statements because cap space and all that sort of thing. But it is interesting to see that there is some merit to that report that, hey, I might be done, which would be great. But
great for the Seahawks division.
I'm sure it seemed like that Beckham seems like he would want to come back. Von Miller, I don't know, because he said, there was an interview he did leading up to the Super Bowl where he said, hey, I didn't want to leave Denver.
I would stay in Denver.
They traded me. So he could be done. I'm sure, I got another ring. I'm going back to Denver. Screw this,
That'd be interesting.
I would be fine with it. Keep him in the we do have to play Denver this year.
Denver's on the schedule this year.
But they've got Drew Lock still at quarterback. So until that changes, I'm not, But that is, I mean, it's something that we have to look at, considering that Aaron Donald technically is, at this moment, is still in the NFC West. So, that. Plus, we look at the NFL on the 18th. Roger Goodell is reportedly negotiating a new deal, which, take that as you will, how you feel about the commissioner. Is likely to receive a new contract extension in the coming months. I'm not as, the only thing with looking at commissioners of these sports, we'll transition over here to the lockout in a second. Usually it's more so of there's a group behind the commissioner. The commissioner's like the face of everything, right? He's like who you put your blame on as compared to the actual group that, is making these decisions. Like in terms of the lockout, the MLB owners made that decision, right? It wasn't Rob Manfred said, screw it.
Lockout.
he had a little button on his desk.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Goodell, I could care less for. I don't know who you bring in as a new commissioner, but I think he plays it out for a while.
Yeah.
So back to that prospect thing. I mean, on the 20th, there were reports that the prospects may boycott that combine, with 155 players being prepared to announce a formal boycott due to its bubble sort of protocols, including boycotting testing, workouts, interviews. Which would, I mean, this is kind of an ongoing thing because the combine is obviously, like we've talked about, is a big deal. But it seems like there's kind of varying things. I mean, we look at the other thing on the 20th that Sean McVay could be offered a $15 million deal to go to TV. But with what he was saying at the parade, I don't think he's going to look at that right now, with saying run it back and all that, which
Yeah.
I'll be happy to look back at that clip when the Rams lose in the divisional next year or whatever.
Mhm.
I don't have that much faith.
Hot take.
There, yeah, someone write it down. We'll look at it next season. But then on the 21st, do you want to look at what happened on the 21st today?
The NFL is partnering with the XFL. So XFL agrees to give NFL a petri dish to experiment with proposed rules, develop officials, and more. Part owner of the league, Danny Garcia, states that the XFL will not be a development league for the NFL. So what do you think this is? A money partnership?
Yeah, I mean, the league talks about wanting player safety. That's like, oh, we want to, they have their own safety committee and all that. But I know the XFL had a really good run with their version of the XFL, the kickoffs, right?
Mm-hmm.
They had a ton of kickoffs and they had no major injuries as compared to the NFL standard kickoffs, where, I know it's gotten better in years past with rule changes and all that, but the kickoff is something that a lot of people have said, hey, just remove it entirely, especially with how many touchbacks we get and how few returns we get. So I think it's a good thing, especially with the way that the XFL has had to close its doors twice.
Yeah.
In its kind of bizarre existence and reiterations. I think it's a good thing because you probably will get some funding and keep that league around, and it gives players more opportunities. If you don't, I know there was one player who played for St. Louis in the XFL who didn't want to play another year in college. He went to the XFL and he signed with an NFL team. It's just another opportunity to go and play that sport, and the XFL plays in the spring. So it's not like it would clash with the NFL, which would kill its ratings.
Right.
It's just another opportunity. I think it's a good thing. I think that was something I've talked about on the podcast of this show. Like a year ago, I said, hey, you guys should team up. It's like, obviously there is fan interest, right? It's just, sometimes starting an entire league is a little tough, so I think it's only a good thing.
Yeah.
It'll be a good thing.
Hopefully moving forward, they can be as successful as the NBA with the G League and being able to bring players up and whatnot. So,
and as long as there's a Seattle team still, it's okay. If I get rid of a Seattle team, I lose a little bit of interest.
Yeah, for sure. You want to go ahead and move things over to our lockout segment.
We do have that one little note about the agents don't want a boycott. Representatives advising these prospects to hold off in workouts until pro days if Combine's bubble protocols remain. So it kind of seems like it's more of the bubble. I was more interested in thinking that it was about the with moving all the workouts on one day, which, I mean, I don't know if you put bench press and doing all those in-person drills, it seems like a lot for one day.
For sure.
Because if I absolutely go ham, on the bench press, how am I going to do in a 3-cone drill, later on in the day? I might be exhausted, but
and
it
not
seems
having, like you said, that athletic trainer or masseuse.
To recover my body properly instead of I'm just going to go sit in the hotel, so that's, I mean, it's something to watch as the Combine, I believe it should be coming up. I think it's in March because I believe the draft is in April. Yeah. April, May. So it would be coming up, but that's something that we'll have to keep tabs on as the offseason progresses.